Thanks for joining us. Now, as I think about the world of finance, well, I should probably explain who I am. Breaking News is the financial commentary service of Reuters. What we do basically is we take opinion on all things financial. So my beats are usually to cover Wall Street. I'm based in New York, and US car companies. I've taken on green finance and sustainability and finance more in the past few years, which is one of the reasons I suppose I'm sitting here. But when I think about finance, I look out on a big scale. I think as we were hearing this morning from Zoe Knight of HSBC, there's a need for $100 trillion over the next decade or so of capital just for proper infrastructure for sustainability. And we have around the world hundreds of trillions of dollars of money sitting around looking for good homes. And if I look around some of the big banks, I see a lot of them doing a lot of research, a lot of talking about getting into sustainable development, getting into financing it. They've all got good research arms. I think there's a fair degree of fear because they fear losing, say, the millennials who are about to inherit their parents' money. And I think there's a lot of greed. They see there's a good way to make money off. There's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not the golden gecko kind of greed. But then, I look at what's actually happening on the ground, and I see that some of the big so-called sustainability investors, like Impacts, only have like $15 billion of assets under management, give or take, and mostly they invest in equities, which doesn't really get us to a good way of scaling up what we're trying to do. So what I'm hoping we'll do now, we've got people on the panel here who hopefully can give us some ideas of how to get a bit further along in getting finance to do a better job of getting the green economy pushing. So, Lars, I'm going to start with you here. So, you are I'm going to call you a reformed hedge fund manager, which is where you spent most of your career before setting up your business. Tell me, given what I've just described about how you've got there's a need for the money, there's also money on the sidelines. What is it that's stopping that money getting to where it needs to go at the moment?
Yeah, I think, well, thanks for that, first of all. I should say I'm not entirely reformed. I still invest in hedge funds, so there's like a bad character trait. I think one thing I just want to hit on the head, it's interesting, I always get accused of being a hedge fund manager when I talk about stuff that has nothing to do with it. But if you had all this room filled with hedge fund managers, and you had a choice between two investments that each had similar risk-return characteristics, and one was entirely green and one was entirely fossil fuel, I don't think I've ever met a hedge fund manager that would not rather invest in the green stuff. Like, they're not intrinsically bad people. And so I think, in fact, you can take that type of capital, hedge fund money or venture money or private money, and you can look at it and say, well, it's like any other thing. They're trying to make the best risk-adjusted return investments they can. So why is that not funneled its way to green technologies or green investments on any significant scale until now? Well, it's the same reason as a lot of things don't get funded. There hasn't been very good data. There hasn't been a lot of success stories, a lot of Googles, a lot of Facebooks, a lot of people chattering about, well, if you had invested in all the solar technologies or heat pump technologies or whatever have you over the last 10 years, you would have had a return profile of 50% annualized, and you would have been an idiot to miss out. In all the time I've looked at green technologies and I've invested in some, I've never been confronted with anything like that. A green index, a green anything, where anyone who knows anything about anything finance would have invested, or you would have been remiss for not doing so. Yeah. And I think that's really quite natural. You can even go, it'd be really interesting to know that, I don't know how many people are at this conference, but I bet there are very, very few people that have used their own private funds. So not their government's funds, not some foundation funds, not other investors' funds, their own money to significantly invest in green technologies. I bet it would be a very small minority. So we're all talking green, but few people are talking with their wallets. And I think that's very symptomatic. Meanwhile, half the people here will own Facebook and Google shares. Half of them will own Vanguard funds. They'll own U.S. Treasuries, which is where all these, what you say, $90 trillion, I think it's even more actually, right? Where all these monies sit. So we should just be a little bit careful about that double standard. When we're talking green, we're spending other people's money. When we're talking our own wallet or our kids' savings, we go to Vanguard. And think a little bit about why that is. And I think it's just there's no great history of fantastic returns and missed opportunities. And maybe that's a good place to start.
What green investments are there out there that I could go and invest in along, as you're saying, I do happen to own Facebook shares just because I put it in as a joke at the IPO and wanted to buy it. Largely because our guys at Breaking News said this isn't worth what it's going to IPO, so I thought I'd have a hedge. And it's done very well, thank you very much. But where would I invest in a stock that would get me there? So Tesla, Tesla's already ridiculously overvalued by any
to be honest, that is not at all my space.
Yeah.
I've actually written a book about optimal portfolio theory, so let's not talk about that, but like, it is part of the problem. Where is your green? I would say go talk to Samy and invest in his fund. Well, actually, Sam and Samy.
Yeah.
That's real investment opportunities, and if they had sustained periods of fantastic returns, they should see massive inflows because the money is there. And what do you mean the money is there? Well, again, there's trillions of dollars sitting earning 0%, at zero risk in U.S. Treasuries or UK or gilts. So the money is definitely there. There's just not been a compelling reason to put it to use.
Yeah. Well, Samy, why don't we bring you in here now? Again, I would describe you as a sort of reform banker in some respects. When you're now on the investing side, you spent several years at various banks. And I did remind you of this before we started. I found a clip of Samy where he described equity investing as a bit like open heart surgery. It just is so painful for the owners, which is why debt financing is probably better. So Samy, given what we've just been talking about, the way to invest for most people, it seems then, in renewable energy or sustainable finance would be to do it through loans and bonds. Is that correct?
Well, what we've seen now is renewable energy has grabbed the attention of green economy, but there are a couple of points. One is that green economy is not just renewable energy. It spans into what's called, there's the mitigation, which is renewable energy, but there's also adaptation, which people need to redefine as risk. So if we want money to go towards green economy, what we need to do is start looking at, have we mispriced risk? Have we misallocated risk? Today, no one is looking at the exposure of companies, or very few are looking at the exposure of companies to climate change. And my point being that if we're able to draw in central banks into the discussions, which since I started in this field in 2014, they're missing in action. Them and the rating agencies. More and more hedge funds are asking their investment targets, have you done a risk assessment on your exposure to climate? The central banks have still yet to come in. When they do, you'll see more money flowing towards helping companies adapt to climate change. That's one. Two is we've just lived through a period of quantitative easing that we've never seen before. And that was kicked off by the US quantitative easing, which was targeted, so there was $650 billion targeted towards mortgage-backed securities. And that gave banks the comfort that, if they are investing in that asset class, they have a pool of liquidity that they can go knocking on, i.e. the central banks. There's no reason why that liquidity, those type of liquidity instruments can't be made available for infrastructure and green infrastructure investments. So if you're asked a bank today to lock in for 25 years, they'll tend to shy away. But if they know that they have liquidity instruments, whether that's at the central bank, whether that's in the form of a yield co, whether capital markets, they'll crowd in. The point being, I think we need to start thinking like the investors think and not expect investors, as Lars has said, just to want to invest just because it's green. That's not sufficient.
Right. Lars, maybe bring that back to you. The point that Samy was making, it strikes me that there are ways to get people more involved, I suppose. And that's one thing you're trying to do with your outfit. Why don't you just tell us quickly what it is you're trying to do and how you're getting there?
Yeah, so I don't know if we're getting there, but so what we're trying to do is, so just 10-second background. So I'm a hedge fund manager. We started AlliedCrowds as sort of a way of giving back. And one of the things I thought was there was an incredible absence of good information in this space. So we build what we modestly think is the best and biggest database in the world, what you call alternative capital providers. So that means all the list that includes venture capital funds, impact funds, angel networks, crowdfunding, and what you'd call semi-public institutions. And so we have 7,000 of them that all invest in the emerging markets. So that if you are, say, a Ghanaian solar entrepreneur or SME and you're looking for funding, you can go to this database and you can look up firms that would invest in your outfit given whatever criteria. So say Ghana, solar, the more specific, say you want equity, and the more specific you can get, the better it is. Then what we've done is we've created a machine learning process around that where we rank the capital providers by the keywords that match the keywords that you give us. And so essentially, the more specific you get out of these 7,000, you can rank them according to your geography, your business, and the more specific you are the business, the better the ranking gets. And then we make this available. So entrepreneurs, we get lots of entrepreneurs hitting us up every day. We're just an information source. So one of the things we're doing with the reason I'm here is because actually I think this morning the site was finally loaded where we're doing this with WGEO. So we can change the taxonomy from regular sectors. So instead of having it be agriculture or green energy, within green energy, we can be very, very specific about the sort of the specific businesses that's looking for funding and who would be the best matches. So for an organization like WGEO, it's fantastic because you become the hub of information based on this database. And you become the sort of called quarterback that anyone should go to. I myself been desperately looking for money when I started my hedge funds, and of course I would go to a free resource. In fact, I'd give a lot of time to whoever made that resource available to. So that's what we do. And there's no reason this should be expensive, because it's not expensive to make.
And who's coming in with money? Is it the organizations you listed earlier on, or is it anyone can come in? So can an individual come into your platform and say, I want to put $50?
No, you don't invest by us. We're just information.
Right.
Just information. So if someone is looking at investing, raising money for a solar panel project in Kenya, well, hopefully Sam's firm would rank right on top, because they would be idiotic to not get in touch with Sam and say, please invest some money with me. And we're trying to be that intermediary. Now, who the hell is AlliedCrowds? We're nobodies. So it's far better for this data to sit at WGEO than it is for it to sit at AlliedCrowds, which is why we're cooperating with WGEO. So we're trying to be the intermediary that gets money from Sam or Samy to this local entrepreneur.
And Sam, let's bring you in. So Lars has briefly mentioned what you do. Why don't you just give people a brief introduction of how you operate?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so we have coded a digital investment platform where individuals can actually direct invest to make a return on investment of, say, expected 4 to 6%. Have a very tangible and digital impact on people's lives, as they can follow how the project removes kerosene and diesel and replaces it by solar, as well as have a very leveraged climate impact. And then we mix that in, and that's kind of our job, right? To prove the data points, prove the market, and allow Samy and Lars in his previous life to invest in our direct fund, to have a much more leveraged impact and proven and stable return on investment. Yeah.
So how do you get investors interested? Given what we've been talking about, how there's this gap.
Right.
How is it you entice people in? Are you asking for a certain size that you can't invest if you're not putting in at least 100,000, or is it anything upwards is fine? How do you?
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation, right? So we really want to make this accessible for everybody. So currently we're live in Europe, across the European Union, and we'll open up here certainly if there is enough interest. You should talk with me in that case. But it's minimum 25 euros. Now most people go in with several thousands, that's fine, or many people do that. And a lot of people just go in with 25 bucks to see how it works, and they can upgrade. Yeah.
Remind us, how much have you raised so far? What have you achieved so far?
Right, so we've been online for a little bit more than 1.5 years. We've originated about 2.2 million euros. And so when you come into the world of massive finance and you go, 2.2 million euros, really, right? Is that impactful? Well, it depends on how speed blind one is, right? So that means in our case, 180,000 people that are getting access to electricity and some 56,000 tons of carbon dioxide metric. That means approximately, you were from New York, right, Antony? Mm-hmm. So that means approximately 13,000 back and forth trips from Dubai to New York. And that's impact. And now we're going to scale that.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? So how do you scale that? I mean, you still got to. I think one of the things that's getting the speed pressure here is that obviously everyone's looking at the SDGs, Paris climate goals, saying, okay, we need to do this by 2025, 2030, 2040, 2050. When you think about scaling it up, what do you have in mind of what you're doing?
I think a very important part of what we're doing is proving the market, being a conduit, and really, since we are online and live with all of this data of how people pay for electricity in these markets, over time we can become the channel for mainstream finance to address this market, and certainly then we'll have a lot of scale. But I think it's also important to emphasize that currently, exactly as Lars says and Samy says, funding isn't our biggest problem, right? So we have access to capital from various channels, the crowd, institutionals, corporates that actively invest in our campaigns, as you will see on our webpage. Corporates, companies that go in order to make a leveraged impact and co-invest with the crowd. So money isn't really the problem there, right? It is proving the risk, finding the projects, our local team in Nairobi, and that kind of thing. That's where the scalability part will be.
Right. Yeah. So, Samy, bringing you back in, is this the kind of thing you look at and say, yes, okay, it's very small, but the way this scales up could be interesting. With the fact you've got not just money going in there and you've got projects being finalised, but it strikes me the data could be quite interesting as well for people, which could, the fact you get payments data is surely going to get a lot more people interested. Also, you did say that, yes, you're not seeing a lot from central bankers and rating agencies. They are beginning. Is it they're just talking a lot, just like a lot of people are? And how do you think they can then, along with obviously with what Sam's doing, how can you all come together to scale this up? I mean, you're running a rather bigger fund, 10 billion or so. So you look at it from a rather different perspective from these two. So what does scalability mean for you?
Well, for green to succeed, it needs an ecosystem. And I think the ecosystem is putting itself in place. So you need data providers, because no one will invest at scale without data. It's the basis of diversification, it's the basis of determining loss norms, it's the basis of, so you need the data providers, like Lars's shop. And then you need the innovators, those that are attracted to the higher risk, smaller projects, similar to what Sam is doing. You then need a middle ground between the commercial bank and the institutional investors who really want the data carved out for them, who need predictability. They won't come in without predictability. And the predictability can say this is how much you're going to lose, but they need to know how much they're going to lose. And then you have a middle ground. So as Sam's shop scales up and you can aggregate with enough data to justify the diversification. So if you look at rooftop solar in Dubai, it's quickly, it's growing by leaps and bounds from 0 to 6 to 12 megawatts, anticipated to reach triple digits in the next 18 months. Once you are able to aggregate around that, then somebody like the Green Fund comes in and can warehouse that, further allowing for more single projects to come in. Once that gets big enough, then you'll get the rating agencies and banks coming in. Right. So no one entity really has the key. It's getting all of them to work as an ecosystem, and other industries have gone through it. I guess one example is if you look at Jeff Bezos and Amazon, and everybody talks about how e-commerce displaces. Yeah. Jeff Bezos went full circle. It's not e-commerce or bricks and mortar. It's both, and how one feeds into the other, and how together they bring the needed solution. So you definitely need data. You need guys who are on the frontier. You need aggregators like the Dubai Green Fund, and then ultimately you need off-takers like commercial banks and institutional investors who, love the liquidity, love the bonds, and love the predictability.
Yeah. Do you see the difference between what's needed? Obviously, there's a big difference between what's needed in so-called emerging markets and developed ones. So, and there's been a huge growth from where it started in green bonds, and I've seen some interesting green bonds come out from San Francisco Water Authority and others, where they're coming up with structures that will give investors more information on what they're doing, more information on what losses could be, or how they're going to share in things going right. I think, okay, you've got established companies in the West which need to transform, but a lot of what we're looking at, or certainly what Sam's looking at, is in emerging markets. So is there a difference in how this ecosystem sets up between those two parts of the world, or is that just overcomplicated?
No, there always is a difference. Risk appetites are different. The way the different members of the ecosystem interact are different. The lines between the actors are different, but at the core, it's the same evolution that takes place. What you need to have happen is, now we're talking, when you take the case of San Francisco, you're talking about somebody making minute, incremental improvements in terms of how do we define green. So that's the state of evolution there. Whereas in more emergent markets, if you take the scale San Fran all the way down to Africa, you're still putting the basic building blocks of the infrastructure of the ecosystem in place. So there's no point in reinventing the wheel. It's just a matter of readapting what's being done elsewhere. Where I think we need to look at is, where does the frontier money go to? And this kind of, is a question more for Sam and Lars, is do you continue to invest more frontier money in solar cell technology? Or now do you start focusing on batteries, storage, which is the next item in the ecosystem that quickly needs to come in?
Sam?
Yep, and just to add one comment on your question that Samy answered so well, it's what I find as well interesting that we see is that there is a new vertical of how the emerging markets and the San Francisco markets can truly add value to each other. So, for example, what we see as an investment behavior on our platform is people that truly see the fundamental projects as a very strong non-correlated risk model compared to the traditional stock market or the bond market, right? The interest rate market. What they see is that this is an aggregation of tens of thousands of people who are replacing kerosene with solar, and they make money on day one. So it's a very rational purchase. It has nothing to do with the stock markets or the interest rate market, and therefore it is very uncorrelated to the rest of their investment appetite, and therefore there's a very big symbiotic space created for us to act upon, right? And then in terms of answering the question on where do we go next on technology, I think there's a lot of different startups and companies and tech innovation plays and all of this in that space. For us, it's about commoditization and scale, right? And it's really about one thing. Is the price of solar fully loaded, fully financed with all of its distribution margins and everything competitive to the price of kerosene and diesel and batteries in that local stock market, right? So, and today we're way beyond that tipping point. It's as much as 30% or 40% cheaper. So, I don't really need to have a strong opinion about that because we got guys like Elon Musk and the team working on getting the battery prices down, and by the time they've gone that far, maybe we'll be ready for them. But also that is not our bottleneck today. It's not the cost of the technology. It's the access to finance for these specific projects.
How are you getting? How do you find investors are taking on the aspect of this? I think you were mentioning earlier that you're sort of playing around a little bit with the guarantees or whatever. So, what are you finding?
Yeah, it's like it's hard not to become a very optimistic person if you work with what I do and with my team, right? So we have a feed right now on my cell phone. I can pull it up, which is just new people who've never heard about us that are actively taking the time to study up and investing in these projects. It's like the antithesis of Donald Trump's Twitter feed, right? It's just optimism all the time, right? And so what we've learned from them is that because we do mix in DFIs, multilaterals, corporates to kind of reduce the investor risk. And what we see is that, of course, it gives a clear effect. So, for example, we've had the British DFI going in and guaranteeing a certain portion of your investment on our platform, and certainly that increases investment appetite. Yeah. But I must say, in the early stage, it feels that people are more interested in the phenomenon and the support than the actual risk, right? So I think also that is something we'll see with time.
Yeah. And Lars, bringing you back in, I mean, as you're saying earlier on, people aren't investing with their own money as much as they ought to, given what they've been talking about. But also just listening to Sam there, aren't you ringing up your hedge fund friends and saying, come on guys, I mean, US Treasuries are virtually zero. Actually, half the time, bonds are going below zero.
Well,
why aren't you putting lots of money? I mean, there's so many opportunities here, and so many.
No,
there must be ways of aggregating this.
I think it's an interesting point. Sam brings up the low correlation. If you think of what is the holy grail of investing, suppose you could create a portfolio of 10 entirely uncorrelated investments with a 2% return. You would virtually be guaranteed 2% return, statistically almost regardless of the risk of the individual investment. So whether is that? So it'd be interesting, the next 2008 happens, how does Sam get on? Like if Sam does well in the next 2008, however it happens, that would be his biggest selling point.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to live through many iterations of states of the world before people say, well, how has he actually fared? And is he actually uncorrelated? Is it actually a good investment? If anyone in this room know of great data to support that Sam has an unparalleled road ahead of him of investing great money at fantastic unsupported returns. Sam would raise more money today than any of the biggest hedge funds in the world, right? It's hard to demonstrate. And it's hard, you look at any investment we all make and we say, well, how do we come to the decision to invest? Well, part of it is what is the historic data. Part of it is what do we think is the runway, what's the specifics of the business. And so far in the green space, there hasn't been enough compelling investment choices at a large scale for, say, the Fidelity green investment that runs $500 gazillion. It just hasn't been there. I wish it was, because the world would be a greener place. And of course, I agree entirely with Samy and Sam that it's a mix of technology advancements, getting it to work on the ground. I think there should be 100 Sams. No offense to Sam, but because some of them will succeed. Hopefully, it's Sam, right? There should be one guy doing it in Kenya and someone doing heat pumps in Australia. There should be every which version, and someone will work. And that's how we built the data and the ecosystem where institutional investors increasingly come and invest very large sums of money. It hasn't happened yet.
And I think this one's fine. Just to be really clear on that, right? I think so. That's the job. That's our job, right? We are one of many in the ecosystem, and literally there's, just to be clear, risk involved in building these companies and funding these entrepreneurs that we're funding. But where we focus and where we agree fundamentally with Lars is we need more people, because the job definition for me and my team and others like us is to prove the data that this works at scale, right? And for that, it's not that, there is no magic. It's just a lot of trial and error for innovation with smart people putting energy, time, and money into it. Finish. It's not that damn hard. So everybody's welcome to join, right?
I'll give you a great example. In London, where I live, for a while the UK government subsidized the feed-in tariff. You put solar panels on your roof. And for a short while, the feed-in tariff was so favorable that you could stick solar panels on the rooftop of any building in the UK, and you were guaranteed a certain rate. So, including the cost of installation, contracts, blah, 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 you were guaranteed a 7% return in pounds sterling, and it was backed up by the UK government irrevocably. So, what do hedge funds do? Right? They find an army of distributors. They buy farms to put solar panels up, install this crap, and short the UK bonds. Right, so they don't even have to take like interest rate risk or anything risk. So you have the perfect arbitrage. And then the government sort of ripped the carpet from underneath them. There's plenty of money. And it happened very, very quickly. It happened quicker. So they had these great systems where they didn't even have to buy the farm. They bought the top layer of the roof of the farm. Like, it's so crazy, right? There's plenty of money if you have that was a great risk-adjusted investment. These were not by people that cared particularly about the environment. There were people that cared a lot about making money for their investors. And so the money was there. And these things are incentives that are being acted upon.
Yeah.
I wish there was a greater opportunity set where there was no skewed incentives. There was just great investment opportunities, which is why I wish that a guy like Sam and Samy succeeds, because then there will be tons of money coming in behind it. And I think a convener like WGO is a great place to illustrate this, to convene the technologies, to convene the funding sources, convene the research, and just make all this accessible. Because the money is there, and these guys are great examples to be at the forefront of trying to make it happen.
And when I look at, say, over in the US, I look at, say, a platform like Lending Club or Prosper, or any of the other alternative lenders that set up. The idea initially was they'd be a marketplace, it would be people like me going on and agreeing to take on risk for people on the other end. And it very quickly became a platform that was overtaken by institutional money. I know they've all gone through their various issues of funding, of scandals, whatever, which is understandable, I suppose, given that that's what happens to finance a lot of the time. But I look at that and I think, well, that scaled up pretty quickly. I think Lending Club was founded, I'm going to say 10 years ago. What's stopping that happening in the green space? Well, I'm thinking if it's emerging markets, is it because a Lending Club, you can look at overall data for the US consumer and go, it's okay if I've got a big enough loan, or if I aggregate enough loans, I know what kind of risk I'm taking. Is that the big difference?
So just in case people don't know what Lending Club is. So Lending Club is a peer-to-peer lending platform. It's the biggest in the world. Imagine you're refinancing your car loan. You go in on lendingclub.com and you bang in your age, your car, your credit score, blah, blah, blah. And out it spits saying you can borrow a 3-year loan at 7%, whatever the number is, right? So it sounded really cool in the beginning. You get to put your picture up there where you live, and here's your happy car, and my mom would give you $100 and everyone's happy. She would make 7%. You would refinance your car loan at 12%, and there would be a spread, and that's how it worked. It's a great business model.
And cheaper than a credit card. Right.
Yeah, exactly, right? Cheaper than you're currently doing. So that scaled up like it was like unbelievably so. And it was just a cheaper way of doing it than you going to a bank or wherever and refinancing your loan on the paper and going to 10 different banks. It was just cheaper and better, right? So it went from being funded by my mom's $100 to very large pension funds, insurance companies that now have 95% of the funding of a Lending Club. But it's not that they sit there and click and say, I want to fund this person in Milwaukee and this person in LA, this is a credit card. They don't even know. They will put in parameters and say, we want to put in $500 million, and over the next 18 months, we want to do no more than 15% of any one loan, and we want from this to this credit score. So that's beautiful, right? Because think of just the distribution cost. There's almost zero, right? It's fantastic. So what does Sam need to do to be that? If Sam had an unbelievable array of opportunities set, he would get very large institutions. He could get Samy to invest in Samy. It's like beautiful synergy right there. Where Samy is not going to sit on Sam's platform and pick this loan but not that loan. Samy is going to say, well, I'm going to buy $100 million in Kenya, $50 million in Uganda, and I want these kind of credit scores. That's how you get scale. Can Sam provide the underlying opportunities? That's the challenge. And can he do it cost efficiently and show that the data works so that it's a good return? That's going to be the challenge. And Sam has very good answers to how he's going to do that. But that I see as the challenge.
Sam?
I'm getting on the spot.
That it sounds like I have a lot to do, right? But so first of all, in terms of the lending club conversation, sounds perfect, right? Sounds great. There was a big problem. They came in, they fixed the market imperfection, and they grabbed a big slice of the market, and everybody won on it. Now they've, in specific lending club, had some issues the last year, right? But in general on the phenomenon, I don't see a problem. They had a different investor set that wanted to go in and give more scale, and I'm pretty sure that they're very happy about that because they solved the problem, right? That's the same with us. Now, what we're going to do specifically, right, is right now we're filling up a proof of concept fund where people who just don't want to go in and specifically click on each project on our platform, because we understand that they want to have a portfolio. We've seen the investor interest and we're listening to it. So we've have a very talented team in place, and we're just going to start with something very small that proves the concept of somewhere around 10 million euros, right, that we're launching right now. And then invite me again in 6 months, and I can talk about the performance of filling it and starting to deploy it. And over the next few years, we'll probably have the data to prove how amazing it is too. But with the same risk mitigation structures, with the same non-correlation factors, right? And since we have our own team on the ground in Kenya, by now, I'd say we have a, rather excellent due diligence. Now, is it good enough? That remains to be proven, yeah? But we only want to deal with the people who are willing to take the risk. Now, I'd love to shoot a return question, if that's okay, Anthony. And just ask, since we are in this world here, and I have pretty strong convictions, relatively loosely held on the topic, should these opportunities that have, in our case, we're called TRINE because it's triple impact, people, planet, profit, right? It means triple. Should they have a lower financial return just because they're doing an impact? Or should they compete with everything on the open market in terms of finance? I would love to hear, you guys' opinion on it, because that's a different world.
Let's put that one to Samy.
Well, sooner or later, the numbers will merge. So today you have people looking at double bottom line or triple bottom line. People in, what did you call it?
People, planet, profit.
Yeah, people, planet, profit, or, and you have those just looking at profit. As those just looking at profit get taxed, whether directly or indirectly, and by taxed, I don't mean the government putting a levy. By taxed, I mean, if you're not paying attention to externalities, who's paying for the externalities? If you're not paying attention to your own risk exposure, who's dinging you on your credit risk rating because you haven't taken into account what climate change is going to do to your logistical chain. So sooner or later you're going to get dinged, and those two numbers are going to start emerging. But right now you do need a pool of funders who do look at the bottom double line, profit and impact, until such time as those two numbers merge. And yeah, you should get a discount for the impact you bring to the table. Should the discount be reasonable? Yeah. You're also up against the fact that we're operating in very, very thin margins in finance. So the difference between a AAA and a BBB is already thin, and even junk is getting really cheap pricing. So how much more of a discount do you give? That's the challenge. The challenge is not necessarily do you give a discount for impact. You do, but how do you give a discount in a world where you've got negative rates in some market? That's an interesting question to solve, but the impact should get a discount, yes.
Lars, what do you think?
I think it should be up to whoever's money it is. Like if it's my money, all else equal, I'd much rather invest in green stuff. But if I make a lot less money doing so, I'll invest in other stuff. If it's whoever funded the various green impact funds, it should be their decision. For how much of a discount versus how much good do you want to do from a green perspective. And I hugely subscribe to your argument about externalities, and it's a hard one to get right. Taxation is very, very hard to get right, and a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to get around stuff like that. But I ultimately think it should be decided by the funders, which is it's interesting because if you take Sam's platform, you have two people that click on his site, and you have one that's very, very environmentally minded, that's willing to make no money, but invest $1,000. That's great, and bless that person. And then you have someone that absolutely could care less about the environment and clicking on his platform. I think for Sam to raise a lot of money in the long term, or the whole sector to raise a lot of money in the long term, that's the person you want. If you can make that person invest in green energy, it's not necessarily just a bad person, it's just someone that's not investing to do good. You're going to raise a lot more money. Yeah. I mean, we mentioned 90 trillion before. Like, I bet you 99% of that 90 trillion is there to make money, not to have impact. Yeah. And so you're just going to 100-fold the amount of money you can raise if you capture the second person.
I suppose the ultimate goal will be, like, going back to what Samy was saying, is that at some point it no longer is green investing, it's just investing. Right?
Yes.
So that's when you want.
Okay, well, thanks very much. You better wrap up there. Please join me in thanking our panelists, Lars, Sam, and Samy. Thanks for joining us.
So much.